Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us today. It's that time when we talk about project management again. And today we're going to talk about a day in the life of a project manager. I promise you it's going to be an interesting session today. In case you haven't clicked the follow button yet, please follow this channel, like, comment, and share this video. We continue to provide contents that help you learn and develop in your career. My name is Ayo Kwewumi. I'm a program manager and a certified project management professional. I have multiple agile certifications and multiple certifications across different fields with years of experience leading lots of multi-million dollar projects and managing project managers. I help people get into project management both in IT and non-IT fields, such as medical, data, government, consulting, agriculture, engineering, manufacturing, not-for-profit industries, just to mention a few today. And I also help existing project managers achieve their full potentials. I've helped people with zero project management experience or tech skills to transition into project management. Whether you're an aspiring project manager, you're a new project manager, or you're an experienced project manager who's looking for that experience and awesome coach and mentor, I'm here to help you today. So you're in the right place today. Today is going to be awesome with our alumni Grace, who has graciously agreed to share with us what her typical day looks like and tips about being a project manager and the great things she gained attending one of our boot camps. Get ready with your questions as we begin today.
My name is Grace, and I'm a project manager at Simcor. And what I do typically is that I lead very high impact projects. So essentially, I turn high level goals and plans, what we'll call strategy, into real but very measurable outcomes. I align cross functional teams, I manage risk, I deliver results, and these results could either be new technology, enhance existing operations, or drive enterprise or regional wide change. And as a project manager, I typically wear many hats and would discuss that as we go along. So I'm really excited to share what a typical day looks like in my role. And hopefully, for anyone who is aspiring to become a project manager or who is already a project manager, I'll leave you with practical insights that help me guide my journey as a project manager. You're on mute, Ayo. You're doing the same thing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I know you mentioned that you work with Simco. So what does Simco, what do they do?
Okay. So Simcor is a Canadian company, and what we do is that we provide businesses and technology solutions to some of the major organizations in the country, in Canada. So essentially, these organizations would include banks, they would include government agencies, telecommunications, and even insurance companies. So at the core of Simcor, we help these organizations securely manage their data and exchange very sensitive data. So we make sure that data moves reliably and safely and at scale from the organizations to the end users. And I imagine that your next line of question would be, what is, what do I refer to as secure data transfer? How do we do this? Or what is secure data transfer? It goes beyond, how we used to transfer data from one phone to the other with Bluetooth back in those days, but now we could just send them across using WhatsApp. So it goes beyond that. So what we do is that we play a very pivotal role in making sure sensitive information like financial statements, our tax documents, T4, customers' records, they move safely and securely between systems and organizations. So, from a technological standpoint, we use tools like end to end data encryption, data masking, strict access controls to keep that data protected. And why Syncore is very unique and why what we do is very unique is that we do not only support the digital aspect of this data transfer, but we also support the physical channels. So whether it's delivering secure e-statements or managing print and mail services for regulated documents, we've got the entire Canada covered. We are located in 4 different regions. So our centralized platforms enable this real-time trackable data transfer across multiple channels. So if you think about how you receive your tax documents today, when you want to file your tax during tax filing, right? That T4 document, it doesn't breaking it down really. Your big organizations, the banks, would send it to us in, say, AFP or zip file formats as fully formatted files. We embed those files in what you see as the paper version, and then we use like a middle agent, like Canada Post, to courier it and deliver it to you. So we do much more than that. And that's just keeping it very mildly. So in short, SimCore acts as a secure bridge between high volume data exchange, helping our clients, which is you, everyone on the call, no, rather, our clients, the big banks, helping them streamline their operations, prevent fraud, and build trust, all while making sure that we are compliant with all the regulatory requirements in a company like in a country like Canada and in a highly regulated environment like the banks that we deal with.
Wow, wow. That sounds it sounded a little bit technical to me, but I'll let you speak. So what so I think people would have an understanding of what the organization does and what secure data transfer is now. What's a typical day like for you? Are you dealing with all this data? Are you the one managing the data, or what does a typical day look like for you?
So let me start with the last question, right? I studied microbiology as a first degree, and then as a second degree, I studied business. I had a master's in business administration. So I am not the one handling the technical aspect of this data transfer and what SimCore does. But I manage the nexus between the technical teams, the operational teams, the legal teams, the compliance team. And it's interesting how a few days ago, someone who is in this call, I had to invite her because we were having a conversation and she said she just got a job and she said, Chris, tell me, what is it like a day in the life of a project manager? And I said, Ayo has already reached out to me to speak about this. And the first thing that came to my mind was the life of a mom or a parent with a vibrant toddler who is on summer vacation, right? So if you're a parent, you know how you wake up with your perfectly laid out plan. Breakfast at 8 a.m. You take a walk at 9 a.m. because the weather is very good here in Kitchener, particularly. Some quiet screen time at 10. And then all of a sudden, your child spills a cup of juice on the rug and or maybe on your freshly folded laundry because you did laundry overnight and you just want to chill during the weekend. And then this child was supposed to take snacks, and snack was supposed to be banana, but the child decides that they no longer like banana. And what becomes urgent for that child at that time is to build maybe a spaceship out of Lego. But the piece that they're looking for to build that spaceship is maybe a piece that you vacuumed last week. Imagine how chaotic that could be. So that's what it is like in as a project manager. Not every day. Some days are nice, but those days are not, we don't have those days come all the time. So, as a project manager, leading multiple teams at Simco and also leading multiple projects, because in my role as well, I also act as a program manager. I walk into each day with a perfect plan, very perfect plan, everything very comprehensive. My calendar's booked, meetings booked, sometimes booked 1 week ahead, sometimes booked a month ahead. Project dashboards updated, stakeholder emails queued up. And by 10 a.m., something becomes very urgent. Maybe a client sends an escalation and didn't send the escalation to me, but sends the escalation to a VP, a director, and everybody begins to look for me. And maybe a dependency is delayed, or a team member who was supposed to deliver on a critical task that day calls in to say, oh, they just rushed my mom to the hospital. And in that moment, my job becomes about adapting quickly, thoughtfully, and without losing sight of the very big picture, just like a parent trying to navigate a toddler's meltdown. So at that time, and that's why when I say my name with a smile. I have to gracefully calm down, assess the situation, reprioritize, and keep things moving forward with grace again. So for me, what defines a day, a good day for me, is not about how I stick to the plan. It's about how effectively I lead when the plan goes out the window. It's knowing which of the fires are very important to quench at that time, who needs support, how do I keep things moving. So behind the scenes, I'm happy to, go through like a breakdown from an 8 a.m. to a 5 p.m. if we have that time and if you want me to go into details and if
Mhm.
everyone else is interested in knowing that.
Yeah, yeah. I think we will keep it high level for now because of time, and then
Okay,
if we need to drill down into it, we can as we go on. And you said something very interesting to me as a project manager. When I was coming into this field of project management, because I am an accidental project manager, right? I started working on projects. I didn't even know I was working on projects, and then things started to move up from there. And one of the things I read in the book is, you plan, you schedule, you plan your scope, you have your budget. But, in project management, it never works like that, right? You have those things, right? As a good project manager, you have to have a plan, right? But as things unfold, as you get into every day, you see that one day is different from the other, right? Some days are pretty quiet, and then the next day it's like you're doing a lot of firefighting. So I really relate to that. And, for people who know project management, no 2 days is the same, right? So
correct.
every day is different. So Grace, when we talk about your role, okay, we know you work in an organization that deals with data, secure data transfer, and it's a technical organization from what I can hear. Is your role a technical role or a non-technical role? Or you sit in between both the technical and the non-technical? How would you describe your role?
So um, I'll start by telling you that when I interviewed for this role, my hiring manager, who was the one who interviewed me, he said, "Oh, we're not looking for a technical project manager. We're just looking for a project manager who is interested in evolving with us as the company evolves." And I was excited to join, and I joined, and I saw that along the line, the job actually requires me to become a technical project manager. So, to your point, it's a hybrid for me, right? Because again, my job ensures that the one who is managing the strategic initiatives, client projects, and these projects have to be delivered on time, on budget, and within scope, which sounds like what every project manager should be doing. But because I also manage the cross-functional teams with developers, and work with business analysts, quality assurance teams, and very importantly, I manage my stakeholders, my sponsors, the business owners, the project owners, the delivery leads. And these sponsors are not technical, right? And like everyone would know, when a project goes well, the project manager. When a project doesn't go well, it's the project manager. When my developers come and says, we need, this budget is not enough. I need 3,000 hours when it's only 200 hours that have been approved. It's one thing for them to say that, but again, the role of a project manager requires to ask the whys, why, all those questions. So it's one thing, and it's interesting because the developers, they can't, they're most times they're speaking your language. So you want them to break it down because you need to go back and explain. And without even knowing it, your ability to explain further to your sponsors in a way where at the end of the day, it's a win-win situation. They approve that budget. They're only able to do that if they see reason and sense in what the explanation you have given. So my role, again, because I said I manage all of this, I handle the documentation aspects, which might not be technical. I also handle at the nexus of the developers, the quality assurance team, the business analysts, the compliance team. I find myself in that technical role. So the project management space is, or rather, the role of a project manager is evolving. That's one of the things I find very interesting. I joined as a non-technical PM, but I can tell you, Ayo, that I'm a technical PM. you know. I hope I
That's
answered that question.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. And the reason why I ask is there are a lot of people who want to get into project management, and most of the time they think about project management. Once they hear project management, they think about it as first as technology, right? And then they begin to think about it as coding. So I've had the opportunity of, one of my friends who happened to be an experienced project manager in one of the organizations where he worked, right? It was a startup. And part of the requirements was that he understands basic coding, right, in a specific language. And their task they give to him, and as a project manager, is expected to code, right? And a lot of people think about a project manager, especially for people who are outside of the project management world, right? They think about, so once they hear things like project manager, project scheduler, anything project, or they hear a business analyst or things like that, right? A data analyst, for example, they think about it as, oh, this must involve coding, which is why I ask, right? And but the project management world is a very vast world where you have both technical and non-technical skills. So there are people in project management who don't even understand technology. There are project managers that work practically everywhere. There are project managers in agriculture, in government, consulting. Some of them they don't know anything about tech, right? So I just wanted some of the people on the call today who want to get, who want to make a career in project management, and they are non-techie and they don't want to go into tech, right? Maybe they just want to be scheduling, or they want to develop, they just want the non-technical piece of it to know that, there's a world out there, there's a job out there that exists for you that is not technical, right? So those are the things that are important. As a project manager, though, it's very important that you're versed, right? And as Grace mentioned, you're able to, in some cases, depending on where you find yourself, being able to transfer those technical terms into non-technical terms for the people who are non-technical. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, Grace, thanks for sharing that. So going to tools that you use at work. So what kind of tools do you use at work? Or maybe not for this job, right? What kind of tools have you used both in this job and in your previous roles as a project manager?
Okay. Um, that's a very, very wonderful question because when I think about it, like my toolkit for me is my secret weapon, right? And I think if you check so many documentations, if you check LinkedIn, it's most times we'll talk about as project managers, we'll talk about how we use the Microsoft project, we use Jira, we use Confluence. But before I even get started, I just want to say that we have our phones, and like every phone, you have all of these applications or all of these tools, platforms that we're constantly downloading without even knowing how to use them. And in project management interviews, they'll usually ask, oh, do you have experience using this? Do you have experience using this? That was the case for me. And I remember that what my script at that time was, oh, I have a flair for playing games. And because I'm very interested in playing games, I'm able to learn tools as I evolve as a project manager. But back to your question, um, I use tools so much because as a project manager, it helps me stay very organized. And depending on what it is that I am doing, if I'm planning or if I'm scheduling, I'm using Microsoft Project, or as basic as Excel, I'm using Excel. And depending on the project that I'm driving, if I'm working with agile teams, I'm using Jira and I'm using Confluence to manage sprints and also for documentation purposes. And at the core of what I do is communication as a project manager. I use my emails, right? I use Slack. I use the call function on the Teams platform, and to ensure that everyone on my on my team, they know where all the documents are. I use SharePoint to ensure that we have all our files in a consolidated form, and also to ensure that I manage critical tasks and action items. I use Asana as well. For risk identification and risk tracking, I use RaidLog. And I don't think I have mentioned Copilot. Copilot, as far as I'm concerned, is a tool that I use. I use it every day. Last week, I was supposed to create a status update, and honestly, maybe because I wasn't keeping track, or maybe I was overwhelmed. I just went to Copilot. I said, because usually I would turn on my transcriptions. I just went to Copilot. I said, I need to create a status report on this project. Create one for me. And pop, it just came up. And all I just need to do was to modify. So all these tools, use them to connect with people, manage complexities, turn strategies into very meaningful results. And they've helped me. They've helped me manage time.
That's good. That's good. And I like the fact that you mentioned Copilot because we're not, as we move from non-dynamic tools, the Microsoft projects of this world, the Primaveras of this world, into the dynamic tools like the Asana, Monday.com, the Jiras of this world. Now, AI is also playing a part in some of those things, right? And Grace mentioned Copilot. So that's something, if you're someone who's an aspiring project manager, you want to know how to use the right prompts when you're using these AI tools, right? So that's
Mhm.
something important for you. That can short circuit some of your processes. It can help you manage time. A project manager is somebody who prioritizes. You're most of the time, fighting fires. And it doesn't matter what level of project management you're in. I always tell people that when you're a project manager, either they call you a project manager, your project analyst, your project scheduler, your project whatever the name comes with, right? Or you move up and become what they call a program manager or portfolio manager, manager of a project management office, project director, and all that, right? You're doing practically the same thing, but at a different level, right? So you need to know how to use all these tools because these are the things that would help you be organized. These are the things that will help you deliver value for your organization as a project manager. Okay, and I now we're getting into the juicy part of it. I know a lot of people who are here on the call today want to understand, how has your career journey been, right? So how has it been for you for your career journey? So maybe that's has the career journey been? How was your transition? Because you were, at least from your accent, we know you were not born in North America, and then you're here now, you're in the field where you want to be. How has it been for you transitioning from where you were, where you came from, to where you are now today? How's your career journey been?
So I'll be very sincere. Um, One of the reasons why we came to Canada was because we were aware that Canada is a land of opportunities, and that's the truth. The opportunities abound. But again, if we're honest to ourselves, how prepared are we for those opportunities? I was in the bank for many years before I left, before I came to Canada. And I came into Canada and I knew for me, I actually knew that I wanted to be a project manager. Maybe I wasn't clear on which sector, right? And I understood that there were jobs. But as a Nigerian, like you've already mentioned, I'm a Nigerian. I'm an Igbo girl. And sometimes what we want to do is wuru wuru to the answer without actually getting very prepared. So I came into Canada and before I left the bank, I was working with a startup just for a short period, and I was a project manager there. But we didn't have any specific methodology. We were just about meeting client timelines, implementing the projects, and within the budget, but there was no structure. So I came into Canada, I went into LinkedIn, and when I started to apply for jobs, I was seeing all these applications. I got my first job interview, and I remember saying to my husband, babe, just imagine if this first job is the first one that I just get, you know. And then I went into this interview, and after they asked me the second question, first question is usually tell me about yourself. After they asked me the second question, and by the time before we got to the end of the interview, I was praying that this interview comes to an end because my God, what am I? I didn't have anything to say. I didn't have the answers. And at that point, I realized that it was important for me to get a PMP certification, right? Get a PMP. And speaking about the PMP certification, I realized that because, you know, too many times in the job description, they would say, oh, somebody that was PMI certified. So, first of all, the PMP was important in distinguishing me amongst the 10,000 people who were also applying for this job and also helping me understand what what project management was about, speaking the technical terms as a project manager, so I'm able to defend myself in those interviews. So my career journey in Canada, I'm one of those people who got those interviews, but I wasn't prepared to defend myself or to express myself as a project manager because I thought I could just rough it and get into it until I now started to study. And so I took a break at some point. I took a break. I went in to get my project management certification. I studied, I understood what the principles of project management were, the scope, the timeline, the cost. I understood all of that. And thankfully, I got a job not so long after I came in. I got a job. I got a very wonderful job. And I started again. And the plan at that time was also we route the answer, you know. So I about my career transition in Canada from Nigeria, it's been one that I look back and I'm thankful to God as to how I started. How I started because there were times when I realized that I needed to go back to the basis, right? Go back to the basis of what project management was, understanding what it is that I needed to stay on the job and not just stay on the job, but be exceptional on that job because I had an exceptional career back in Nigeria. So it's that thing where we say, how do we say it? Is the opportunity meets preparedness and be preparedness meets opportunities. So going back to the books, going back to study, going back to understand the nitty-gritties of project management so that I'm able to be my best self and shine.
I'm on mute now again. Okay, that's good. So, Grace, so how easy was the transition from Nigeria to the Nigerian workspace to the Canadian North American workspace? Would you say it was easy? Would you say it was, maybe not too easy, not too crazy? Or would you say, oh my God, it's crazy? How was the transition?
So it's quite different, right? Because like in Nigerians, we're Nigerians and we already know ourselves, right? We already know ourselves to a very large extent. So coming over here, the work style is different. The work style is different because in Nigeria, regardless of how what's the word? Of how many things you have going, we typically would not say no. And I came in here and I realized that I was in an environment where they were ready to dump, or rather, assign multiple tasks to me at the same time without multiple tasks at the same time while giving me an opportunity to speak. But the Nigerian in me would typically not say no, oh, I'm overwhelmed at this time. And but that in itself was impacting my delivery of the projects. And also communicating with other people, just understanding the work dynamics, understanding the work style, understanding the politics and the workspace, right? So it was a bit difficult for me, but I began to have clarity when I had a mentor, right? I was in I was in a position where I could express exactly what I was feeling to someone who had gone ahead of me on that journey, to someone who has been there, seen that, and is able to tell me, oh, no, he's your sponsor. He doesn't mean to be difficult, but he would say no because as a sponsor, revenue is important to him. But it's also your role as a project manager to tell him that no, budget is not enough and give him justifications to that, right? So having someone who I could lean on to, having someone who I could speak to helped my transition and helped me um, sink my roots into the Canadian workspace.
Great. Thanks, Grace. And I remember my own story too, having worked with all the, big multinationals before moving over to Canada. I'd worked, with Nestle, the Diageos of this world, worked in banking myself. And in moving over to this space, right, and getting into the workspace, though I had worked in a multinational environment where I had worked with people from diverse cultures across the world, But moving here was was a totally different thing for me. Team management here was totally different. I had managed teams in Nigeria, and I got here, and it was as if I didn't even know what I was doing, more or less, right? I'll talk to people and the way they react sometimes, the way they want to say things, is different. The way you manage, client relationship, stakeholder relationship here is a little bit different. It just has its own nuances that is different from how we used to manage things back home in Nigeria. And I know you've worked with, while in some of your previous organizations, you work with, some of these big clients like the Facebooks of the world, this world, the Amazons. So how was the relationship when you were working on that job, right? In dealing with some of these big clients, and how did you pick up your confidence when you were in that role?
Yeah, so one of my roles, I'd worked with Hugo Technologies, and it was quite big, because our clients at that time, it was a client-facing project. It was client-facing project I was leading, and it was with the fan clients, the likes of Meta. Um, these guys, they know what they want, and they tell you what they want and how they want it, which is very different from where I was coming from. So in those roles, it was and also, I think just like you mentioned, working with the teams, I need you to do something as a client so that I'm able to deliver this result. And the client tells me, oh no, I can't do that, or I'm not in the capacity to do that. But this is something that I need you to do. So, my ability to speak, those roles helped me to understand how important it was to be firm, right, in my delivery, my communication, even while being diplomatic, but just being firm, making the client understand that you need to get to this point to enable me get to this point. And also, the I had to ensure that there was very continuous feedback loops, constantly providing feedback, constantly being able to adjust very rapidly. So flexibility, because turnaround just had to be very, very quick. I don't know if I've answered your question, but again, my experience in Hugo, which wasn't a Nigerian company, it sharpened my ability to lead technically complex projects in a very dynamic environment.
Okay. Okay, thanks. And I know you've mentioned this earlier, but I know some people just joined us. Was your background in IT?
No,
Okay.
no, my background was not in IT. My background was in sciences. I studied microbiology. My background was never in IT. No, it
Okay.
wasn't.
Okay. Sounds good. And how would you consider yourself? Would you consider yourself an intentional project manager or an accidental project manager?
Well, I think it's a blend of both because I knew I wanted to do project management in Canada, but how intentional was I? Like I said, I went wuru to the answer, just apply for a job and get a job
Okay.
and learn through the job,
Okay.
right?
Okay, that sounds good. And what would you say are the top five skills that you would encourage a project manager, at least for yourself, based on your experience and having worked with different organizations? And if you can mention some of the organizations where you've worked, that would be good as well. So, what would you say are the top five skills for you to have as a project manager?
I'll give you six, an additional one. And top on the list, I would say it's communication, right? So I'll say communication, the ability to say no, transparency in delivering both good and bad news, prioritization skills, stakeholder management, and adaptability. Um, maybe I'll just speak lightly as a preacher to the very top three. So I'll say, like I said, communication, because honestly, is the foundation. And as project managers, we're constantly bridging the gaps between client teams, the client, your internal teams, leadership, both internal and external. So being very clear, being concise, and being consistent, and also being confident in delivering what it is you have to deliver is very important. It's not negotiable. And beyond that, one of the most underrated skills is the ability to say no, because scope creep will come both from internal forces and external forces. It could come from even like the delivery lead that, as far as is concerned, the budget is enough to deal with, to deliver the client scope and also deal with technical debt, right? So your ability to push back diplomatically, it's very important. Otherwise, you just find out that you're derailing the project because you want to be a people pleaser. So it's about protecting the scope without damaging relationships, because at the end of the day, you need both relationships. And then third on the list I said was transparency. It's a very big one. Because sometimes, and honestly, when I started, it's Ayo, you'd remember that so many times I've shared good news with you, but I've also held back. Shared the bad news with you, but I've told you how I'm very worried and scared about going to break the bad news to a certain individual who's my sponsor. Because this sponsor of mine, you can have 6 slides and he won't even let you get through the first slide, because it's a bad news you're about breaking. But as project managers, it's important that we are confidently delivering those bad news and we're transparent about it, because the sooner or the earlier we're able to share this with our stakeholders, it gives them the time to be able to adjust and respond. And understanding that their ultimate role on that in the company and um, as a key individual in the project is to help us deliver the project successfully. And then the fourth on the list I said was prioritization. We're constantly doing a lot of things, like the life in the mom toddler scenario that I presented, juggling multiple tasks, resources, shifting demands. We're being able to step back, assess what is most important, which of the fires needs to go off, would help us reduce burnout for ourselves as individuals and also the teams. And stakeholder management. And when I say stakeholder management, I'm not just talking about the sponsors, the team members, people relationships, people management, understanding that there are different personalities. And IO would typically say a business analyst can make them sack you as a project manager, right? And also understanding that these business analysts, they play a very pivotal role in the project, because that documentation is important to drive the delivery by the developers. And you just might have a business analyst that, their brain used to touch. Some days they're in a good mood, some other days. So just understanding these personalities, aligning expectations, and keeping everyone engaged takes emotional intelligence and a lot of patience. So essentially, your ability to adapt. Plans would change. Plans would always change. Risks would continue to materialize. Things would go off script. Your ability to stay calm, adjust quickly, lead with confidence, communicate when things go well and when things don't go well. Be very transparent with the client who wakes up and says, "Oh, we have a legal requirement to migrate by July 18th." But they haven't signed the BRD, so you can't engage developers, or you might have even have resources assigned, but because BRD hasn't been signed, you can't get the project started. Your ability to stand firm, politely say, "Oh, while I understand the legal requirements, your inability to provide these artifacts, this would definitely not enable us to deliver this project on the 18th of July, right?" And then calling these things out as they are early on in the project. These are very important skills that every project manager should equip themselves with.
Yeah. Thanks, Grace. Thanks. And I know Nonye shared in the chat, people management, she mentioned is also, one of those skills. And I think you mentioned it, here and there, how you manage your stakeholders, and you mentioned communication. And while you didn't mention that, but you said it when you spoke about the business analyst, and Tony has a question about business analyst that I will share now. And you mentioned, team management. You mentioned, working with a business analyst, and one of my favorite sayings is that as a project manager, the person that sacks you the fastest is a business analyst,
Mhm.
right? So if you're a project manager and you don't know what your business analysts know, right? You are actually, as a project manager, supposed to know more than they do, right? Because I've worked on projects in the past where, and not one, not two, a number of projects where my business analyst didn't understand what we were going to deliver for that project, right? So it's my role as a project manager to guide them to make my job easy. If you don't, then those people would eventually put you in trouble because whatever they write, if you understand what's called the Gulf of Evaluation, the gulf of evaluation actually happens the most, starts really from your business analyst because they are the ones who collect your requirements for you. They are the ones who engage mostly with the clients when it comes to the technical discussions, and they're the ones documenting those things. As a project manager, you're doing the same, but it's just at a different level. It's more at a strategic level. So, going to Toyin's question now, she said, is a day in the life of a project manager similar in any way to that of a business analyst? That's our first question. And that's to you, Grace.
Are you sure you don't want to answer that one? I've not been a business analyst before. But I don't think so, right? I think because so my role as a project manager, it typically starts at the conceptualization stage, at the point where the client wakes up and comes up with this very brilliant idea to say, let's say, we do not want to use, if you any of one of you remembers the cards that we were using then back in Nigeria, the first cards before the magnetic strip, the chip and pin. No, the chip and pin was is the evolution. Anyway, when the client wakes up with this very fantastic idea, right? My role as a project manager starts from that point to the point where we initiate the project and post implementation phase. But a business analyst, really, they're at some point at the requirement gathering stage, and then their role begins to dwindle down, or their involvement in the project begins to dwindle down at the point where the developers now start. And they're not really, it's not their business if you are on time, if you're managing budget, they can literally burn your budget down. So I don't think so, and Ayo, keep me correct here. I don't think so is the same. I'm the one who is managing stakeholders as a project manager. If something goes wrong with my project, if there's a deviation, my sponsors wouldn't go to business analysts. The business analysts, they don't care about that. They're just, I think, not to make light of their role as a business analyst is very critical in the, cycle of a project, but it's not as involved or as engaging as a project manager.
Mhm. Yeah, and maybe I would just like to add a few things there. So these are two different roles, right? That they play two different roles on a project as well. So what does a project manager do? A project manager is more on the strategic side of things, on the people management side of things, like Nonye said, and ensuring that going back to what Grace said, from concept to solution, right, they're there. So they start right from when the project is conceptualized, when they're doing the business case, the project manager is there. The business analyst may not be there at that time. It doesn't mean, like Grace said, their role super important on a project. You get into when you're chartering your project, you have a project charter. The project manager's role is to go, understand the scope. At that point, the project manager is, doubling as a project manager and a business analyst most of the time. Okay. And then once you get into the planning phase, okay, which is where you begin to properly document your requirement, the business analyst then comes in. That's when they begin to play a role in it. So as a project manager, I've mentioned a couple of things, project quality, project scope, project scheduling. You're involved in everything that regards as regards to the project. A business analyst is mostly concerned about two major things. Number one is requirement. Number two is the solution. Okay. So this is the requirement the business give to us that they want. Okay. And then making sure that they go through that cycle, that the life cycle of that requirement up to when it comes as an idea, right? Or when it comes as a spoken word to when the solution is delivered. Is this what you gave to us? Is this what we delivered? A project manager would have to understand both, right? But a business analyst does not necessarily have to understand a project manager's job because, they are not held accountable for something that goes wrong on the project. The project manager is held accountable for everything, Okay, the business analyst is only held accountable. Maybe there's a requirement that they didn't get it right or they didn't document something right. So that's where the difference comes in when I in answering your question, Tony. And in wrapping that question up, I would say something that as a business analyst, right, you're more on the tactical side of the work. Okay. You're tactical, you're documenting, you're meeting, you are engaging with people, you are taking down things, you are writing them down. The project manager is not writing as much down as you are. The project manager's role is to see something and we get into a meeting. For instance, Grace mentioned something about, let's go back to the projects where we want to transition from, in North America, we use the tap cards, right? You can take your card and tap on a payment system. So let's go back to the magnetic stripe credit cards or cards that we used to use back then. And you want to transition from those magnetic stripe cards to the the ones that you can tap. Okay. The project manager, if we get into a meeting, what the project manager is hearing is, even without anybody saying it, how do we manage the risk of somebody taking this card and tapping it when the person is not the real owner of the card? Okay. The project manager is thinking about that risk strategic. Okay. A business analyst, okay, role in that same card that we're talking about is that business analyst is not thinking about that. The business analyst role is to hear what the stakeholder is saying, to say, I want this card to be able to tap with, Square machine, any Stripe machine, right? That's what the business analyst is hearing. He or she doesn't necessarily have to care about, where that card is tapped, who is tapping it, whether the card is being stolen. They don't care about the risk, more or less, right? So it's your role as a project manager. You are seeing everything. The business analyst is seeing, their own part of the project. I call the project manager's role, you have the helicopter vision of the project. The business analyst has, their own tunnel vision of what they are doing. Both roles, like, we've mentioned earlier, critical, very important. It's just like, when you have a surgery team, right? You have, consultants, you have general practitioners, you have, nurses, you have all those people. Everybody who is involved is very important. They just play different roles. So that's how I answer that question. Tony, I hope I answered that question. I hope Grace did justice to it. Second question, Grace, this is to you still. Does the business analyst use the tools that you mentioned? So you mentioned Jira, Confluence, Trello, Asana, etc. Do business analysts use those tools too?
Well, not all of them. To create the stories, a business analyst will definitely use the Jira. But again, like we've mentioned, the business analyst is not responsible for the financials of the project, right? So a project manager, a business analyst wouldn't be in my role or in my projects that I deliver. The business analyst wouldn't be using the PPM, the Microsoft projects, the business analyst might just be a contributor to, say, a raid log, right? Especially if I have attention, the business analyst as responsible for a particular task. So not all the tasks. They also have the tools that they use, but not all the tasks that I use in my implementation as a project manager would a business analyst be using.
Thanks, Grace. And I'll just quickly add to that as a project manager, Grace has mentioned it already. You're not using a Microsoft project, for example, because as a project manager, you're the one who's responsible for developing the project schedule, not the business analyst. They can help you gather requirements for it. Most of the time, you're the one who's responsible for it. And it takes me to another thing, not a question now, just something to mention for those of you who are trying to get into project management. A project manager's role, remember, does not come as the title project manager all the time, right? It comes as different titles, right? So you might be scheduling, that might just be your role. You might just be a scheduler, that's what you're doing. You might just be focused on quality assurance, okay? That's what you do. I had someone who attended, one of my classes. His role as a project manager was just in testing. An organization, they build, they have, large infrastructures that they build. His role is project manager for testing. That's all he does. He doesn't know how to build the tool. He doesn't care about how it's coded. His role is just focus on the test cases, test scripts, all those things. Those are the things that he works on, right? So it all depends, but mostly as a business analyst, you may not be using things like Microsoft Project. You may not have to use the Primaveras of this world. Trello you may use because Trello is more of a Kanban board, right? So you may have to use it. Asana, you may and may not. If you're looking at the scheduling part, the budgeting part of Asana, you may not be using it. When you're looking at, the other parts of it where you have to document things, you may be using it. So that's just to answer your question, Tony. I hope that also did justice to that second question. Okay. Now I'm going to Nonye's question. Nonye has a question. At what point in the SDLC, that's for those who don't know what the SDLC is the software development lifecycle, does the job of a business analyst end? And that's to you, Grace. And I can chip in as well.
Mhm. So, so for my project, right? Because again, the business analysts played a very pivotal role in gathering the requirements and documenting the requirements. I do not discharge my business analyst until we go live, as a matter of fact. So in my allocation, maybe during requirements, you might have been allocated at say an 80%, but when the developers are in delivery or in development, um, I still have you as part of my project because at too many times I find that there's a need to go back to the client to clarify on the requirements or even reach out to the BSA to say, is this exactly what it is we're supposed to be doing? So that's the role of the BSA, and I keep them accountable up to the point where we are going live. So we're we're part of the journey. You play a critical role.
Okay, thanks, Grace. And for those who don't know what it is, so the software development lifecycle goes through planning, requirement analysis, your designing, your coding or development, as they would call it, your testing, you're deploying, you're doing post-production maintenance, okay? And there's another layer added to it recently, especially when you're looking at it from the safe perspective, which is a scaled agile framework. But without getting into all that, so as a business analyst, where does your role start and end? Like Grace mentioned, it all depends on the project. It depends on the project manager that you're working with. Sometimes you're not involved, maybe really in the early part of it, which is the planning phase. You may not be as involved. But once we get into requirement analysis, you're getting involved. Depending on the organization, by the time we get into design, in the design phase, what's your role as a business analyst? Your role is you have the requirement already, you have your business requirement document, or you have your requirements or your product backlog already, right? And then once you're moving, depending on what methodology you're using or the approach you're using, once you're moving into the sprints, then that job is handed over to the design team, right? So they're focused on just designing. You're not the one doing all that. And then when we get into development, you have, software developers who are writing the codes. You're not likely the one doing all that as a business analyst. But what I've seen most of the time is as a business analyst, you're very well involved in the requirement analysis phase. And then once we get into testing, so they use the business analyst in both roles. You are in requirement analysis, and then when we get into testing, you're the one helping to write the test cases. You're writing, all the acceptance criteria and, all those stuff. So that's what you're doing as a business analyst mostly. But as Grace said, as a business analyst, you should know what you're doing so that irrespective of where you find yourself and the organization, you have to get everything. If whatever is required of you, you have it done. I see Kachi is raising up his or her hand, and I would like to take Kachi for 1 sec. Okay, Kachi, over to you.
Yeah, hi, Aya. Thanks so much. Yeah, I see people are already typing questions. I'm not really the type of person that can express myself so well via typing. I rather, you know, um, speak it out for better understanding of what I want to ask. Okay, my name is Kachi, right? I'm a data analyst actually, right? Yeah, they said the world is evolving, so yeah, I it's not cast in stone that I'll be stuck as a data analyst, right? And because my job entails meeting people, collecting data from different departments, engaging with different people like project managers and all that. Right. I have two questions I wanted to ask Grace, but I see someone has already asked that first question, which is the difference between a master and a project manager, right? Now, my second question to Grace is this. Because as a data analyst, one thing I do is I try to incorporate what I do into my daily life as an individual. So I wanted to ask Grace as a project manager, how is she able, or how does she, as a PM, integrate her profession into some events in her personal life? Like, say you want to travel, you want to organize events, you want to do this and not do that. So how, as a PM, how do you, as a project manager, integrate what you do at work into some of your personal events or your personal life scenario? Thank you.
Thanks, Kachi. That's a great question.
That's a very great question, and I'm smiling already because he talked about organizing parties. So yes, so project management, Kachi, for you who is a data analyst, is project management isn't just an office. It sneaks into my personal life so many times. So taking, say for instance, planning a party, for example, it's a full project. So first, I would kick things off by defining the scope of the party. What's the vibe? Who would my audience be? How many people am I talking about? What's the budget? I'll build a timeline with key milestones like when do I need to send invites? What food am I ordering and when do I have to order this food because I expect it to be delivered at a particular time? And the settings for decoration. So it's like creating a mini roadmap for fun. And then next, I'll juggle resources, delegating tasks to friends or family who can handle music, who will be the DJ, who will be responsible for snacks, or even identifying the snacks, who will be in charge of the playlist. That in itself, it's all about teamwork again. So it doesn't stop. Then we're constantly planning for risk like we do in every project. What if it rains? Are we thinking outdoor or indoor? What if the cake arrives late? Is there a backup plan? Communication is also very critical, like we have said so many times. That's a secret source. So I'll keep everyone in the loop with updates. Is there a dress code? Are we doing African time? Or it is strictly Canadian style? If you do not arrive at a particular time, then food would have finished, small chops would have finished. Also, are we expecting to receive gifts? Communication, crystal, very transparent, and prioritization is also key. So, because let's be honest, the venue has to be locked down before we worry about, say, balloons. So by using my project management skills, I turned what could have been a stressful scramble into a smooth, fun event that everyone remembers and enjoys. Plus, it's way more satisfying when you see all the pieces come together like clockwork. So whether it's boardroom or it's a birthday bash or it's an Owambe, project management skills are always working behind the scenes to make things happen.
Thanks, Grace. Kachi, I hope that question has been answered. And
Very, very well. Very well. Thank you, Grace.
You're welcome.
thanks, Kachi. And Nonye, I hope your question was answered also about the SDLC, right? About where the job of a BA starts and where it ends. For those who are just joining us, this session is meant to be a max 2 hour session. So in another 1 hour, we would be rounding up this session just to let you know if you're just joining and you want to have a link to the video, we're putting that, I put that in the chat as well. You can just drop your name, your email address, and then we'll send you a link to the video once it's ready. That's the recording of this session. Okay, Grace, next question. What's the difference between a Scrum Master and a project manager?
Okay, so how do I say this very briefly? So a project manager is responsible for the overall project delivery. You're managing scope, you're managing budget, you're managing resources, you're managing risk. So think about the full picture from start to finish, right? So they're working with cross-functional teams. They're coordinating with stakeholders. They're ensuring that the business objectives are met internally and externally. However, the Scrum Master, on the other hand, works specifically with agile teams, and their focus is more about how the team works. They're removing blockers, they're facilitating Scrum ceremonies like stand-ups, the retrospectives. They're helping the team to continuously improve. So they're more like a coach and a servant leader. to the team rather than someone managing the entire project. So when you think about project manager, the project manager owns the project while the scrum master supports the team. But you see, it also depends on the organization and the project that you're working on. These two roles, you can find them overlap, or you can also find them working together.
Thanks, Grace. I wanted to mention that too, that you can find them, working on the same thing, and you can find them overlapping. So currently I lead a program, and in that program you have project managers who also double as Scrum Masters, right? So they decided that, what, for this project, we're going full Scrum. They moved on from, being a project manager in their role, right? Not that their title changed in the organization, but now they're just focused as Scrum Masters. And like Grace said, with Scrum, as a Scrum Master, you're focused on just one approach of delivering projects, okay, which is the Scrum approach, okay. And as a project manager, you have that experience in Scrum, whether you're doing waterfall, which is a traditional project management approach, or you're doing hybrid, you could be Kanban, whatever you're using. As a project manager, you have a grip on everything. A Scrum Master is just focused on the Scrum methodology or the Scrum approach in delivering project. So I hope that your question was also answered for me. A thumbs up would be good, or just dropping something in the chat would be good as well. So Grace, going back to some of the questions as well. So what functions do you work with in your
Sorry, I've
organization?
responded to you. You
Okay,
called my name. I've responded. See the chat.
okay, thanks for me. Okay, sounds good. And Great. So I was asking, what are the functions that you work with in your organization? What are the different functions you work with, maybe in this current organization that you work in now, and in the previous organizations that you work with as a project manager?
Okay, so for every project that I work on right now, I'm constantly working with the operations team. I'm working with the legal team because our clients are highly regulated. I'm working with legal, I'm working with compliance, I'm working with again the technology team, right? That's the core team. The implementation team. I'm working with the change team, the change control board. So cross-functional, and it could change. And because we are across four different regions, I could wake up tomorrow on a project and I realize that there's a need to interact with another team. So I'm constantly working with cross-functional teams. Let me know if I answered your question.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, at least, and it's the same with most PMs too. You're working on different projects, across you're working with different individuals in different departments and helping, bring the vision to life. Okay, the other question I was gonna ask you is, so in getting into your career,
Mhm.
how did you get to where you are today? You've mentioned the things you did. You did your PMP, you interviewed. So did you attend a boot camp? And how was it for you? And what would be your advice to people about that?
Okay, so when I started, one of the ways Ayo introduced me for people who didn't join at the time we started was Ayo said that I'm one of the alumni, and he's proud to associate with me. I'm saying that again because it's a privilege to associate with Ayo. Ayo is um, Aya is my mentor. So if you've heard me say anything about a mentor, Aya is my mentor as a project manager, right? It's interesting how we prioritize having spiritual leaders, but we do not lay so much emphasis in the need to have mentors that we look up to in our career. And that in itself has helped my transition and helped me to be able to speak confidently and to be able to deliver projects confidently. So I was at some point in my career, I realized that again, because I said as a Nigerian, sometimes we just want to do anyhow to get to the answer, right? So I was one of those people who did woo to the answer. But at some point, I realized that I needed to take a backseat to understand the basics of project management, go back into reading. But I'm not one to pick up a book and really read, right? I wanted like a hands-on experience. And at that time, I realized that I was on LinkedIn. I was looking for all these boot camps. I'd attended some of the sessions, it didn't feel like I was getting what it is that I wanted because, again, I wasn't really sure about what I wanted, but I had tasted project management. I had tasted the work environment in Canada. I wanted hands-on experience. Um, it's one thing to read a book and say that Jira does this, Asana does this, you can achieve this with Asana. But it's also another thing to be in a space where you play the role of a project manager and you were given feedback. There's a way you have two categories of feedback. There's a way you say it, I can't remember. And you're giving like someone drops it hot. So at that point, it was a Saturday, just like today, and someone posted a link to a free session, a project management free session. It was supposed to be a 1 hour session, but guys, we went into this session and it was over 2 hours. I remember that day vividly because I just came back from farmers markets. And if you know farmers markets, by the time you're done shopping, you're thinking about the next thing to cook. So it was one of those days where I said, it's a free session. I'm cooking not, they're not going to debit my account. I don't have anything to lose. So I plugged my ears and I started to cook. But at some point, I had to pause and just sit down. It became very interactive. It was this question and answer sessions were very relatable, very practical. And then the responses were very rich. And I'm wondering, how can this guy be doing free work like this in Canada? Because at that session, he was just releasing nuggets, And I was also in transition. I was interviewing for jobs at that time, and he said something about gold plating. That was my first time hearing gold plating, and gold plating was a question that I had been asked in an interview, right? And that interview, I didn't even know the answer to gold plating, and I asked the person who was interviewing me to help me, like explain it to me. So this was a free session where they were dropping nuggets, where they were dropping like very tangible resources for me. And after that session, there was another session, and that's where I got to realize that IO had a boot camp. So maybe I was one of the first people that signed up for that boot camp. And why it was exceptional for me was because even before I had paid for the boot camp, Ayo reached out and said he needs to understand what my goal. And for anyone who didn't join when Ayo introduced himself, Ayo Triple A is the Ayo, So Ayo said he reached out to me, said, "Oh, is it okay if I call you? I want to understand what your goals for this boot camp is." And I said, "See, to get a job is not my problem in this Canada. I've hacked it. But to stay on a job and to excel on a job, be excellent, right? In most companies, there are this periodically HR will release like employee recognition. I want my name to be on that list, right? I wanted to stand out, and this was this was the conversation that I had with him, and we started that boot camp. It was intensive. But looking back in retrospect, I'm grateful for those times. I'm grateful for the learnings. So back to your question, yes, I signed up for a boot camp. It was worth every penny and even more. And even above that, it gave me access to him. I have issues on my job and I don't know how to navigate it. Ayo is one dial away. Sometimes he has not activated his voicemail, right? Sometimes he doesn't pick, but he will make sure to call me. I pay for the boot camp, but the access that I have to him, I can't even get to pay for it. Ayo, please don't bill me for it. And that's also one of the things when I said about having mentorship in my role, or rather in your career in North America. This has stood out for me and it continues to stand out for me. So yes, a boot camp, I'll preach a boot camp, but you want to get value for every penny because we're working very hard in this kind of in this country. So yes, I signed up for a boot camp and it has helped my growth and it continues to help my growth. It continues to help me excel on my job. And very importantly, the access that I have, the mentorship, the role that I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. And I also share sometimes in some of these sessions that attending these sessions enriches you. You listen to things that you didn't know existed, right? And you're learning from it. I myself have mentors. I have people I look up to. I have people that I learn from. And I know some people would be curious if you want to join the classes. I'll paste the link in the chat and we'll talk about it. I know we've got a couple of questions. Isang, I know you have your hand up, and I'll still go to Fumi's question. in the chat and Tutu's question as well in the chat. Isang, I see you had your hand up. Is your question answered, or can we move on to some of the questions that we have?
Oh, hi. Good morning, Ayo. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you, Grace, for your time, and thank you for all the knowledge you've been dropping. So, basically, my question is around stakeholder management, right? It's around handling, not just stakeholder management, handling difficult, like very difficult stakeholders. And when I'm talking about stakeholder, I'm talking about external stakeholder, like your clients, right? Like, have you had that kind of experience? And what strategies did you use to solve that maze?
Thank you, Isang. That's I just smile because I'm still handling one. I'm still handling one, and so many times I'm asking God, when can we go live with this project? And I hope she doesn't have any project anytime soon. But I think mindset is very important, right? They're not just difficult. While you're trying to protect the image of your company, you need to understand that they're also playing that role in their company, right? So and why would we even call them difficult? Sometimes they're pushing back on requirements, or sometimes they're pushing back on cost. They have raised an additional scope, and you as a project manager, you're saying, oh, this is additional cost, so I need to document a PCR, a project change request, and then notify you of the additional cost. And they're pushing it because, again, the revenue is very important. They need to make profit. So understanding that they're not exactly difficult, but it's the interest of the company and the interest of the project from that external side that they're trying to safeguard. It would help you in managing them. So for most instances, and especially one of the ones that I'm working on, being firm, being transparent, communicating what needs to be communicated in a very polite way. And if all odds fails, escalates. There are client success managers, you have your project sponsor. From where we come from, we see escalation as a bad thing, like you want to go and report, but escalate, right? Again, your project sponsors are there to help you deliver the project to success. And so in your role as a project manager, you dealing with an external client who is maybe a director or a VP, you might not be able to call a spade to them because of that level. Sometimes you're able to. But like I said, if all else fails, escalate. So it's better that internally your sponsors or the upper ups in your company, they're hearing it from you, rather than the client going up to escalate to say, oh, I've said to Grace she should do this and she's not doing this. So like I said, keep that continuous feedback loop. Most times these clients, they just want to be made to feel important. Make them feel like you've dropped every other project and you're working on their project. Give them that listening ear. But if all else fails, escalate. That's what I do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Grace, and thanks, Insang, for the question as well. So Tutu has a question here. Tutu said, does every project have SDLC? I haven't heard that term in healthcare PM before. I'll take this quickly, and Grace, if you want to chip in, you can chip in as well. So does every project have SDLC? No, absolutely not. It's only software, as the name goes, software development life cycle, right? So it's only software development projects, okay, that have SDLC. Okay, so software development lifecycle projects. I'll talk about healthcare since you mentioned healthcare. There's a solution that is pretty common in the US called Epic. So if you're doing Epic implementation in healthcare, is that a software development lifecycle project? No. So that's a solution implementation project. You are implementing a solution. That solution, though, if you understand the SDLC, might help you as a project manager because that understanding would help you understand, okay, what do we need to configure here? What do we need to configure there? Okay, so that's one. There are other things I can go into too. So for instance, I've worked on a networking project before. Is it an SDLC project? No. ServiceNow implementation project, SDLC, NO, right? There are some configurations involved, okay? Some coding is involved, not from me. There's a solution architect. There are, ServiceNow experts who are there who are doing some of those things, but those are not software development lifecycle projects. But if you work with startups mostly, okay, you're going to work on SDLC projects because they are developing a tool. You're trying to release a feature. You're trying to, you're trying to fix a bug. All those things are the things you find in software development lifecycle, depending on what phase you're in. Okay, so that's where software development lifecycle comes in. Take, for example, Houston Methodist. In Houston, they want to do, they have, like, when you look at their site, you go on their job site, they have jobs every day, right? That they post, and you see project managers that they have. Some of them is just project manager for process efficiency. So they want from the point that, a patient comes into the hospital, they want to reduce the time that patients spend in hospitals. That's not a project management project. That's not an SDLC project, right? That's just focused on process improvement. And there are tons of project managers who don't even know anything about software development lifecycle because they've never been in it, right? So that's not what they do. So that's one thing I just wanted to mention about software development lifecycle and project management. Software development lifecycle is something specific to software development, okay, but it's not something that apply across project management. There are project managers in agriculture, in education, in different parts of government and all that. Some of them they've never even heard the term software development lifecycle before in their lives, right? So that's one thing I just wanted to mention in answering that question. Tutu, I hope I answered that question that you put in there. Fumi has another question. What's the difference between a risk and an issue in project management? Grace, I'll let you take this one.
I
Or
can
if you want
answer
to.
this. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, this was an interview question for me, right? At some point. So I'll just make it simple in a way that you don't forget. So a risk is something that might happen. It's a potential problem that can affect the project down the line. So you try to plan for it in advance. So think of it as a what if. While an issue, on the other hand, is something that it's already happening. It's a problem that needs to be dealt with. So risk, future possibility, issue, present reality. So like say a bug defect in a software that we're using, that the developers are using for implementation, it's not allowing us to conclude development, do our internal unit testing, and progress to QA testing. That in itself is an issue. We're dealing with it. It's in our face. So risk, future possibility, issue, present reality. You're on mute, Ayo.
I like that. I like that response, right? A risk is something that has not happened, right? That has the potential of happening. An issue is when that thing has already happened. So that's something for us to know this morning. Okay, Grace, something else I'd like to ask you is what kind of projects have you worked on in the past? What kind of projects do you work on now? Just maybe the names of, not the title, if some things are proprietary in the organizations, but in what domains have you managed projects in the past?
Okay, so I've managed the projects in the operational setting, say in the bank. I started my career in the bank, and when I was talking about that, the migration from chip from the magnetic stripe to chip and pin. That was like a card digitization project that I had implemented at a regional scale. And also, I'd managed in my experience in the bank, I'd also led teams where there was a time when I can't really remember. That's one of the problems that we have. Like you do all these things, but you're not documenting. I was responsible for ensuring that the operational ratings of branches across several regions were improved. So essentially, I was sent as the TQM lead, total quality management lead, to some of these teams to improve the delivery, especially for branches where we realized that feedback from clients were not consistent with the GT Bank brand, for instance. And I have also managed AI machine learning projects. I did this in my time in Hugo Technologies. And right now I'm leading technological projects. I'm also leading projects that involve like operational enhancements for servers that are going out of live to increase operational efficiencies. So it's been a blend of operational, technological implementations, and digital um, projects as well.
Thanks, Grace. Another question is, what value does a PMP or a certification, what value does it have when you're trying to get a project management job?
I think I touched on this earlier, right? When I mentioned
Yes, you
the
did.
fact that there are 10,000 people, more than 10, the way you are praying to God for that job is the way so many other people across the world is praying to God for that job. So just like every other certification, it creates that filter, right? It creates that filter, and it's it what's the word? English is failing me. It creates that filter and gives you a leverage. I know that there's the ATS factor, but having that project management, the PMP certification gives you a leverage where your chances of sitting with an interviewer and now defending your knowledge of PMP comes to light. So it's very valuable. It's not a I won't say, I know people who have gotten jobs without PMP, right? My first project management job, I didn't have the PMP certification, but also understanding that the country where you are, it is relevant. It's it increases your credibility as a project management professional, right? So it is valuable. It won't stop you from getting a job, but if it is one layer that you need to one layer of obstacle that you can deal with, it's something that's within your control. There's no reason why anyone shouldn't get the project management certification to get their journey into project management started.
Great, great. And thanks, Grace. I was going to mention that too. PMP, very valuable certification. I would always encourage people to get as many certifications as you can if you have the time and energy for it. However, in this environment that we live in, something I want to point out to that a lot of us miss, especially as immigrants, is the fact that they value experience more than any degree that you have. Okay. I was in a session very early this morning with a different group, and I was talking to them about how they can enhance, their job search and getting what they want. And we're looking at some of the jobs that we consider as super technical. In those jobs, they were asking for a high school certificate, right? But with a certain number of years of experience in that field. Okay. So in this environment, Canada, UK, the US, the people are more focused, the employers are more focused on the experience. Have you done the job before? Okay. And then when you have like 100 people who have done the job before, that's when certifications come in. That's when your bachelor's degree come in. You find lots of people doing, working on massive, crazy projects. I've worked on networking projects. I've worked on, crazy IT projects. Right now, I lead a data program. Am I am I a data expert? The answer is no. I understand their terminologies. There are things you say I can talk to you about it for an hour, but when you're talking about an architect, for instance, I'm not one, right? When you're talking about an expert who has been doing that for maybe 20 years, I'm not one. But I can hold you in a conversation about it, for as long as I reasonably can. So a PMP, very important. However, that's not the only deal breaker, especially for those of us who are trying to break into a field and you're looking at different things that you want to break into. Please don't let those things be the only things that will hold you back. Apply as much as you can, okay? And then let's get to that point and let them be the one to tell you the PMP is the problem. And then you begin to say, okay, yes, truly, this is the problem. And you can apply and be working on your PMP on the side as well. And the PMP is one of the things that our classes cover. So for those who want to register for our classes, the PMP is one of the things it covers. So that class covers both PMP, you're doing practical experience, you're doing everything together in one single class. So that helps you as well. Grace, the other question would be, and I'll get to Toyin's question. And Fumi, thanks for that chip in. Fumi mentioned very true experience counts in the chat. Okay, Grace, another question is what methodologies or approaches do you adopt when you deliver your projects? Do you just use one approach or how does it work for you?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So in my current role, primarily I work with the waterfall framework, especially when it comes to internal planning, because we're very big on documentation, approvals, and governance. We follow a structured approach with clearly defined phases. You've talked about the project life cycle, the initiation, the planning, execution, monitoring, closure, and then the post-implementation phase. So this helps us to clearly ensure that dependencies, the timeline, scope, and budgets are well documented and controlled, which is very essential for compliance and reporting requirements. However, many of my clients work in within the agile environment. So, and I need to work with these clients and the client teams. So this then makes me to have to implement my project with a hybrid methodology. So again, I've learned to blend both methodologies in a hybrid delivery model. It's acceptable by my company, right? Um, so while we maintain the waterfall discipline around documentation, resource planning, and milestones tracking, delivery is somewhat hybrid. Delivery is hybrid, where we're flexible to client request, but also including the waterfall flavors, right? Client wants additional scope. I document the project change request, and then I build a client, and then we go ahead and we implement. So, for example, while we map out the entire project lifecycle upfront, we deliver in short testable increments to hold regular reviews and retrospects with the clients to get clients' feedback. And so really, just to wrap that up, it's a hybrid approach where we're managing change requirements, we're flexible, and we're keeping client engaged throughout the project lifecycle.
Sounds good. Thanks, Grace. What are the top three challenges you would say you face as a project manager?
So top on the list is scope creep, because usually start small. An extra feature here, a slight change there. Sorry, my phone. A slight change there. So scope creep is one of them, and also aligning stakeholders with competing priorities, because every stakeholder brings their own goals, their own expectations, their own timelines, and sometimes the goals don't fully align with one another or with the project. But as a project manager, I find that I have to bridge the gap, facilitate conversations, and have everyone focused on the common objective. And then the third one is the constant challenge of navigating uncertainties and change, especially in the environment where we work. I was in a meeting with the QA a few days ago, this week, and I was saying, well, right now, how is the regression test going? And then I hear no issues to report at this time. We have our schedule. Regression test is supposed to end on the 18th. And you agree to that schedule. And then I asked my guy, are we on track? Are we on track to conclude regression test on the 18th? And then my guy responds and says, I wouldn't know now until we get there on the 18th. So the inability, or rather the constant challenge of navigating uncertainties and change, because there's an uncertainty there in itself. If we get to the 18th and we're not able to conclude regression tests, then we can't start our end-to-end testing with the client. And then I have to deal with that. So no matter how detailed the plans are, things shift, requirement changes, risk becomes realities, resources drop off, or they have to go on an unplanned vacation. So the ability to stay flexible, adapt quickly, and keep the team grounded in what keeps is really what keeps the project moving. So these challenges, they're not very easy, but understanding that they are there, understanding that every project is dynamic and we have to be dynamic in our approach and very intentional in our approach helps us to deliver successful project outcomes.
Thanks, Grace. And I was going to add one that you mentioned earlier, being the one that brings the bad news, right?
Yeah.
You're the ones that bring the good news. At the same time, you're the one that brings the bad news. And nobody wants to hear bad news, especially with executives, right? They always want things to go smoothly. So a challenge is, going to them, telling them that, no, this won't work. We won't be able to deliver this. And they're asking you the 1 million whys, right? That you are supposed to have asked your team, right? So that's one other challenge that we face. Tutu mentioned something in the chat. So she said sorry, Fumi mentioned something in the chat. She mentioned in the UK, and I don't know if Fumi is a he or she, so apologies for that. In the UK, a Scrum Master and PM, they do the same role. Product owners and business analysts do the same role. So for me, this is what I would say. I would say it all depends still, because I have people in the UK, some of them who are they are product managers, they are project managers in the NHS. They don't even understand, they don't even know what Scrum is. Okay. And they are project managers in the NHS. Okay, which is one example. And I know other people too who are, who are project managers in some other organizations in the UK, and they're not Scrum masters. But in some organizations, they just use one stone to kill two birds, right? If they're hiring you as a Scrum Master, you must understand the PM. You must understand PM 100%, like end to end. If they're hiring you as a PM, you must understand Scrum as well. So I would say it depends on the organization. Product owner and business analyst, they do the same role. Yes, I find that very true in a lot of organizations. And depending on the size of the organization, in some organizations, especially when they're pretty big, a product owner is a product owner, right? They have a business analyst role separate, though the lines between those two roles can be blurred. Okay. But when you look at it conceptually too, a product owner is actually a business analyst. Okay. So that's what it is. So I just wanted to mention that before we go ahead. And we're in the last 30 minutes of this conversation today. And Tony mentioned something. She's asking a question. Based on your experience, for someone who's joining an organization as a business analyst, for example, okay, what are the challenges one may likely face on the job when you're joining? Okay, and how should you handle them, especially with stakeholders? I know you said some of these things, but if you want to be specific to the question that Tony is asking, especially with stakeholders or team members that are not always responsive to requests, which can delay the delivery of your work, how do you handle these challenges?
So that's a very good question. I'll try to answer, but I think I'll need you at some point. So stakeholder management, that's a likely challenge, like you've already mentioned, because if they're not being responsive, right, you can't make any progress during the requirement gathering stage. So I would say one advice would be start by building relationships. Start by identify there are people, especially in the environment where we work, these people, you find people who've been in the company for 25 to 30 years, right? How have they know something that we don't know as people who are just starting. They know there are people that have been there that know exactly what needs to be done or knows who needs to be spoken to get things moving. So build relationships. And for every relationship you build or for every help in quotes that you get, there's something about honor. At the end of the call, go back and say, oh, thank you for your time. Oh, thank you so much for that advice. It went a long way. That in itself will give you the privilege of access the next time that you need to come, right? So I'd say, like I said, start by building relationships. Take your time to understand these stakeholders. Um, Reach out for a coffee chat, right? And these are some of the things that we learned in the boot camp with Ayo. It's about, like I said, staying on the job and being exceptional. In after your first week or your second week, you can as little as buy, like, the cards, write something very nice. One of the things that I wrote in one of the cards that I gave one lady who's been in the company for 30 years, I said to her that you've been the calm in the storm. You've helped me navigate the maze that it is in this organization. And she was very excited about it. So request for coffee chats, friendly, and be very genuine in your interests. For this on Thursday, um, an individual reached out. He said his dad was going to the hospital, and then by Friday I reached out. I said, "Oh, I reached out. How are you? How are you doing? How's your dad?" And he responds, "Oh, his dad has been admitted, but I cannot send the BRD to the client today." And I had to say, "I'm genuinely asking about your dad's welfare. This is not about the BRD, right? You're starting a relationship, you're building a relationship." And another thing, be very proactive and clear in your communication. Set expectations very early. What are the deadlines? Let both parties understand what the deadlines are. What's the impact to delays? Because even though you're a BSA, there's a timeline that the project manager would have already documented as to when the requirement gathering session should end and when the BRD should be sent to the clients for approval. So if clients are not forthcoming with the requirements or they are not available, could be as little as being available for meetings, Let them understand that their inability to commit would impact timelines and is going to impact the overall delivery. Don't be afraid to escalate if needed, but do it respectfully and always with the goal of keeping the project moving. And then above all, be very patient with yourself, right? The people who've been in the company for 25 to 30 years, they have gathered lessons, learned lessons over time. Like we typically say, Rome was not built in a day. So it takes time to find your rhythm, to build trust, to feel and feel confident navigating different personalities. Every challenge is a learning opportunity. And then I'll tell you guys something. When I started in the organization that I'm working in right now, one of the projects they wanted to assign to me, it was a program. It wasn't a project because I had 14 different implementations and I was working with different teams. On the external side, I was also working with different teams. And I said to Ayo, I say, Ayo, this one is more than me. Oh." And Ayo said something. He took a deep breath. He said something. He said, but Grace, you will learn on that project. I said the same thing. Somehow, my husband and I, they speak the same language. I said the same to my husband. He said, that you will learn now and you will become better. But that's just the truth. Every challenge is a learning opportunity. So with consistency, be kind to yourself. You, at the end of the day, earn a seat at the table. Right? And don't be afraid, right? Because you come out stronger, especially if you take the lessons and the learnings.
Thanks, Grace. That's powerful. And I was just going to add something to it quickly. You mentioned something, be kind to yourself. That's something very important. Remember that the other person is a human being too, right? The way you want to be treated, treat that person the same way as well. And she mentioned some very valuable pieces there. Some of these people have been there for years. One of the analysts I work with, right? She started working in that position the year I finished primary school. Okay. That for those who don't know, and you may guess or may not be able to, that's, over some 30 something year, over 30 years ago, right? That's when she's been in that role. So I just get there, I'm her manager and I want to prove that, I'm the one who knows everything. I'll mess up, right? So I had to bow to these people, stoop to conquer, as they say, learn from them, listen to their point of view. Sometimes they have a point of view. You want to listen to it. If they say something is not working, why did they say it's not going to work, right? So you want to understand all these things before you just jump into it and then, it goes from frying pan to fire. So that's something very important. It doesn't matter the role that you get, right? I've been manager of a project management office. I had to still listen to these people. Listening is a key skill that would really help you in some of these things. Okay, I know we're getting very close now. We have just about 15 minutes to go. We've answered Toyin's question. When dealing with external clients, are you allowed to contribute to the requirements based on your experience? I'll give a quick one about this, and Grace, you can chime in as well. Yes, you can, okay, but without that requirement being your own requirement, okay? I'll give you an example. So when I want to work on a project, new project, every time I try to learn about that project, what that thing is, what's that domain, what's that thing about that project, okay? And when I'm engaging with the people who own the projects, now we're talking about the external clients or the stakeholders, whoever they are, one of the things that I do as a project manager or as a program manager or in whatever role I find myself is when they say all these things that they say, okay, I ask them a question about something that I know that nobody mentioned, maybe as a requirement, okay, and they didn't mention it. And I would ask them as a question, would you want this thing to do the same thing? And they can say, oh, yeah, I forgot. Yes, this one should be part of it. And then they talk about it. It's not my requirement. They say it, right? I've given them that suggestion. So that's my contribution based on the knowledge that I have about that thing that they are going to implement. I talk about it and say, so why is this solution not having this? Or why is it having this? And sometimes I give the solution and they say, no, 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 this is the reason why we're not implementing this right now because, and they give me like 1,000 reasons. Okay, yeah, that's clear. And then the business analyst can document those things that they've said. So that's what you do when you're dealing with external clients. You can contribute requirements, but don't make it your requirement. Say it in a way that the ownership still belongs to them, not for you as an individual. Okwe, I hope I answered that question. Grace, I don't know if you want to chime in anything on that. Okay, sounds good. I have a certificate in solution in I clarified. Bashir is saying I have a solution certificate in SA, which would be solution architecture, I guess. Please, how does solution architect relate to project management? Okay,
I,
so
I can
okay,
answer that.
please, yeah.
So yeah, so essentially a solution architect is like the visionary for the technical team, for the technical side of things, so when you talk about the infrastructural framework, how they design the overall solution, how the system should work, how the system should relate with each other, what technology to use, how to meet the business needs from a technical perspective. While the project manager, on the other hand, is like the orchestrator. So while the architect is designing the what, the and the how, the PM is making sure the when, the who, and how much are on track. So the PM would typically coordinate timelines, resources, like we have said. So again, the solution architect designs the blueprint. It's approved by, there's a board, not the change control board now. There's usually a team, depending on the organization. There's usually a team that would review that architectural framework once it's approved, before we now start implementation. So again, the solution architect plays a critical role in in um, in identifying the architectural framework, so that at the end of the day, when we go live, because we've implemented this solution, these other solutions are not impacted and nothing is broken. Yeah, architectural review, but thank you. And nothing is broken in production.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. Ola, thanks for adding that. So architectural review board it is. Some organizations they have an IT review board. In some organizations, they have an enterprise architecture. Okay. So that enterprise architecture unit takes so whatever you're doing, they take it to enterprise architecture, they take a look at it and they look at all, like Grace mentioned, all the solutions in the organization, and they're looking at how one interacts with the other. If this breaks down, how does it impact this and all that? I know we have just about two more questions to go, but before we go, I just wanted to quickly mention to those of you who may have questions around what the bootcamp is, what the details are for those who may be interested. And thanks. I see some of those who have registered already. They are in the audience today. Thanks for those who have registered. If you want to reach out, so this is what the class entails. So the class is actually a project management boot camp. You own your own capstone project. So you're working on a project that you own and you're working as a project manager. So you get to really understand the nitty-gritty of being a project manager. So you're doing the things that a project manager would do. You're able to speak the language of a project manager. It goes, it's the curriculum is comprehensive, agile, waterfall, hybrid, IT applications. And when I put IT here, I know a lot of people are curious about IT. That's why we put IT there. A lot of all these things already cover IT. So you want to be a project quality manager, you want to be a project manager, you want to be in some cases, playing the role of a business analyst and a project manager, because there are roles where you're playing the dual role, right? So all that will take care of that, how you build a schedule, manage the dependencies, all the different schedules you're going to play with, a lot of things here. So agile, waterfall, hybrid, and in different applications and how it applies to different industries as well. So we'll talk about that in the class. And then this is led by industry experts, including myself. I'm the lead facilitator for this class. And then as part of the bonus, we review your resume, right? So we review your resume so you can start applying for jobs. And then interview preparation as well, get you prepared, the questions that you'll be asked at the interviews and how you should be able to answer those questions. And we're also talking about AI in project management now. How would you apply artificial intelligence as a project manager? And it's an interactive small class where looking for each of the classes maximum of 15 people in a class. That's a maximum number, right? So we're intentional and really speaking to you as an individual. So that's important. And also, just to mention that you use Jira, Lucidchart, ClickUp, Confluence as well. So those are some of the tools you use, and we'll also open it up to other tools as well. But these tools, definitely, we're going to use them. So that's something I just wanted to quickly mention in the class. And our next class actually is from the 16th of August and it ends 18th October. Schedule Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. and on Wednesdays, 8 to 10 p.m. Central Time. So these classes will also be recorded. They are live classes, but you also have recordings that you can go back to in case you miss one class or the other. And we also, schedule makeup sessions that we can, if you want to chat, we can chat in those sessions as well. Location is virtual. If you want to register, this is the registration link here. I put that in the chat as well for those who may want to register for the class. Like I said, thanks to those who have registered already. So that's the registration link. What's the cost? I know a lot of people that's what they're curious about. 2,000 Canadian dollars, 1,800 right now. If you apply the code, so 10% off, which we usually do from time to time for our classes. And then for those in the States, that's 1,500. And then with 10% of that's 1,350. And this is what you want to apply, PM Career when you go into the site, and that's valid until July 19. Okay. So if you've got any questions, feel free, reach out. We allow payments in installments and in full as well. So if you want to make payments, you can pay in full, you can pay in installments, and you can pay through Zelle, through Interac, your debit card, credit card, or anyhow you want to make payments for the class. So we're going to get into the last set of questions before we go today. And while we're doing that, I just wanted to say a big thank you. I see Yemi put in, thanks for organizing this very informative. The information and advice shared were truly valuable. Yemi is a very strong pillar in the IT community in Dallas, around the Dallas Fort Worth area. Thanks, Yemi, for attending this. He shares a lot of free resources with a lot of people. So, and he's a councilman around Dallas as well. So, if you want to get to know Yemi more too, you can follow Yemi as well. Yemi Salau, that's the name. And thanks, Yemi. Really appreciate you attending this session today. Okay, so last set of questions to ask Grace, and this will take us to the last final piece. Two questions that I'm going to ask you today. So, what advice would you give someone who's just starting?
Someone who is just starting, and if that person is here, the person is already doing one of the advice. You're attending sessions like this, because on this call, we've talked about so many things. We've talked about stakeholders, how they can be difficult. So you understand that they can be difficult. I've also shared tips, and Ayo has also alluded to some of the tips on how you can manage those stakeholders. Attend sessions. The project management space is constantly evolving, right? So it's not the learnings that you had 2 years ago that you should be increasing or rather improving your knowledge bank. And one thing Ayo would always say is there's information all over the place. What are you doing with that information? You could go on the run and plug your ears. There are podcasts if you're a podcast style person. So improve your knowledge bank, interact, network with people. We have PMI chapters, be an active member. There are voluntary opportunities. Take every opportunity that you can take. Seek mentorships. Mentorship goes a very, very, very long way. Register for a boot camp. By all means, it's not about selling a market. If anyone who knows me, I'm a very blunt person. If it has not worked, I will tell you that it has not worked. Personally, it worked. I was never My experience started in the banking industry, right? It's totally different from what I'm doing right now, different from the type of people that I'm working with right now. But for me to be able to speak confidently, the bootcamp gave me that leverage. So sometimes we also, I'm a Christian, so there's the concept of sowing a seed and harvesting. The learnings, or rather the investment you make in yourself, it eventually it 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 it, it creates a harvest for you. So for someone who is just starting, be deliberate about your growth. Be deliberate about where you seek information from, what you seek information for, and find opportunities to practice this knowledge that you have gained over time. So someone who is just starting, and starting could be you just started project management as a career and you just got a job. Create relationships, build relationships. For someone, on the other hand, who is seeking a project management opportunity, there are jobs, right? There's so many jobs. Apply for these jobs. While you're applying, prepare yourself, equip yourself. And when people talk about jobs and applications and they say, oh, they're applying, they're not calling them, one question that I ask is, how many jobs are you applying for? When I've been there, I have been there, I have done that, I have seen it. When I apply for jobs, I keep myself very accountable. I have a spreadsheet where I document how many jobs I have applied for, the job links, the feedback from that job, right? So that at the end of the day, I'm able to say, oh, my target for this week was 50. Did I meet 50? If Monday to Friday was very busy, I know that I'm doubling my efforts in the weekend. And when the jobs start coming, when the recruiters start reaching out to you, you're not going to be surprised. But it's also one thing to have these interviews and you're not prepared for it. I shared my experience for my very first interview. So equip yourself. It helps you in setting yourself out as exceptional during the interview and also during the course of the job. So I've talked about networking, I've talked about being involved, and it's one thing to sign up for a boot camp and become very busy during the boot camp. The boot camp at AAA is very, very intensive. So if you're not ready to get all the learnings, don't waste your time, right? Because IO would hound you. You have assignments to do. You have to submit your assignments. In class, you have to we turn on our cameras. That shouldn't deter you. If you don't, if you can't, there are exceptions to it. But be involved. Prepare yourself, and when those opportunities comes, you have an opportunity to shine.
Thanks, Grace. That's good. And last question for you would be what, and this, please, 1 minute roundup on this one. So what advice would you give on interviews? 1 minute roundup on this.
Prepare. Prepare. And every interview is an opportunity to be better for the next interview, right? So personally, when I have an interview, at the end of the interview, I go back and I document all the questions from that interview, because for my next interview, I don't want to bungle on the questions in the event that I had been asked those questions. Prepare for your interview. It's as simple as going through a JD. There's Copilot, there's ChatGTP. Ask ChatGTP, what are the likely questions that could come out of these questions? And it's one thing to know what the likely questions are, but what do you do about them? Have your script. So if somebody wakes you up in the night and says, oh, tell me about the time where you had to deal with a project that went over budget and you had not, there was still so much to do, you have an answer to that question. So in your preparation, have your script, improve on yourself, be very comfortable with your camera, and just prepare and prepare and prepare and prepare, and don't give up. There are jobs. Apply, be accountable. How many jobs are you applying for? There's also the God factor, but I don't know if it's in the Bible, but there's a saying that heaven helps those that help themselves. So help yourself. And your mindset is very, very important. I know I'm saying so many and it's just 1 minute roundup, but you can't go into a battle with a defeated mindset and and think that you're going to win. So you can't approach LinkedIn and wake up on a particular day and say, I'm not even seeing any job to apply. That day, you're not going to see any job to apply. You can't go into an interview and say, I don't apply since I've been applying since God. How is this one? Right? Regardless of what it is that you're saying, your confessions have to be very aligned with what your heart desires. That's without saying it mildly, without going spiritual.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. I really appreciate. I want to say a big thank you, and please in the chat if you can just drop, how this session has been for you today. We want to, would like to see that. So I really want to say a big thank you to you, Grace, for spending the time to with us today, and a big thank you to everybody who has attended as well. One thing I want to mention in as part of our roundup as well is don't be defeated, please. I know a lot of people, there are people here today who have been applying, you've been attending interviews, maybe it hasn't been working yet. Don't worry, your time is gonna come, okay? Just keep on with what you're doing. Don't lose hope, okay? I've seen people who they attended class and first job they applied for, they got an offer. Okay. I've seen people too who it took a year. I've seen people who it took 2 years. Everybody's journey is different. But at the end of the day, something I always tell people is the journey would be worthwhile. The day you have the offer, you look back and say, my God,
Yeah.
so life can be different, right? So that's one thing I just want to mention to you guys today. Please, like I mentioned in the chat, you can drop, how the session has been for you today in the chat. And one last thing that I used to usually round up class is, what's next for me as an individual? Practice, practice, practice. Whatever you're learning today, whatever you're learning, whatever you're doing. I know some people like, I think for me, you're trying to be a business analyst, continue to practice what you're doing. When either you have a job now or you're looking towards having a job, just continue to do it, okay? Over time, you get better. You become that person that you want to be, okay? And then please, for those who are not following us on Instagram and all the other channels yet, please, I'm appealing to you this morning. Please follow us on those social media channels. I've dropped the chat. I'll drop that in the chat once again as we round up this morning. So please, if you're here and you're not following us yet, please, I would appeal to you to please follow us on these channels. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to, on those questions. Join our next, we're still going to have another free session before this bootcamp will start. So please feel free to join any of our next free sessions. And as well, for those who want to register for the class, I put the link in the chat. You can put in your contacts there and we'll reach out to you. And if you want to reach out on WhatsApp as well, please feel free to reach out on WhatsApp. And like I mentioned, the classes, the payments can be done in installments, so you can pay in installments. You don't have to pay in full at once. If you pay in full, that's appreciated, but you can pay in installments and work out a structure that works with you. Okay, yeah, you can see somebody said he's connecting with Grace on LinkedIn. So please, if you want to connect with Grace on LinkedIn, Grace is there on LinkedIn, and you can please feel free to connect with her. Again, I would say there's nothing in the world as good as preparing for something. So practice, practice, practice. Don't get defeated. Don't let, the recruiters defeat you or the hiring managers defeat you. Your time is going to come. Finally, if you have questions, this is the email, this is the phone number for call or WhatsApp, and this is the website for you to register for those who want to register and take their career to the next level. Would like to say a big thank you once again to Grace for spending the time and sharing your story with us and encouraging others. And to everybody who has attended today, again, I want to say a big thank you to all of you for spending the time and helping us to enrich our community and make people better, in their careers, in their lives. And a big thank you to everybody who would say, you guys have a wonderful weekend. For those who are in Canada, have a wonderful weekend. I guess the weather is good where you are now. For those who are in the States, have a wonderful Independence weekend. Those who are going to barbecues and the parties for Independence, enjoy your weekend, everybody. Have a good one, and bye to everyone.
Thank you so much, Aya. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye.